I just want you to be aware of the whole issue. Let me go back to that picture and we'll end on that. If you're dead, you cannot recover. And that's why I advocate people know about Narcan. Encourage your loved ones to go to treatment, whether they're 15 or 60 or older. My dad got sober at 80 years old. And just to end this, I don't usually share this, but January 22nd, I have not used anything for 31 years. It can be done, Sean. You can do this if you live your life one day at a time.
Next guest speaker, I'm going to let her tell you her story, and she will introduce herself.
I would like to introduce myself as a townie. For those of you who don't know what that means, I will explain. I have spent 48 years of my life living in North Reading. I grew up here, graduated North Reading High School, married my childhood sweetheart, bought a home here, and raised my 3 sons. That is a description of me, a townie. I am also the mother of a recovering drug addict, and I'm here tonight to tell my story. One night, a teenage boy was at a typical teenager's party, doing what kids sometimes do at that age. At this party, a friend of the teen started to badmouth the teen's girlfriend. There were words exchanged, some pushing and shoving. When the friend left the party, he decided he would slash the tires on the teen's truck. Once the teen realized who had slashed his tires, he confronted his friend, and a fistfight began. Several minutes into the fight, the teen realized he was covered in blood. His friend was not using his fists, he was using a knife. The teen's mother received a call from the police that night and was told he was in an ambulance on his way to Winchester Hospital. As she was being driven there, hoping to help her relax, someone said, "It must not be too bad because they're only going to Winchester." No sooner were those words spoken when she received a call and was told to go to Mass General Hospital instead. The teen had been stabbed 8 times. One of the main arteries in his neck had been nicked, and the emergency room doctors told her he was lucky to be alive. Believe it or not, that stabbing happened here in North Reading, and that lucky teenager was my son. That night, the night my son could have died, the idea of a typical teenager's party, doing what kids sometimes do at that age, was my rude awakening. That was 2004. My son was 17 years old and invincible, so he thought. I have now learned that he started to experiment with alcohol when he was only 13 years old. That is right, I said 13. The next step was marijuana. By 17, he was experimenting with cocaine, mushrooms, ecstasy, Vicodin, Percocet, OxyContin, and a variety of other drugs. The list is long. My son told me it would be a much shorter list if I wanted to know what drugs he hadn't tried. By the time my son was 20 years old, he was addicted to heroin. You are probably asking, where were you during all this time? I'll answer that. I was right there. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was involved in the Parents Association, sports, carpooling, and all the other things that go along with raising children. I communicated well with my son, his friends, and their parents. Looking back, I would say I was aware that there was some partying going on, but like some of you here tonight, I thought it was harmless. I know now these teenage parties consisted of alcohol, marijuana, and a variety of other drugs. My son has told me it was easier to buy drugs than to get alcohol. When I asked my son why he chose to experiment with drugs, he said he was just curious. Some kids try drugs because of peer pressure, to feel better, to fit in, to not be so shy, to deal with the pressures of life, or simply because they are curious. My son will say he understood the risks of experimenting with drugs. He was young and naive, truly unable to understand the consequences of the choices he was making. When I finally realized the extent of my son's drug use, he was already addicted. Now you're probably asking, how did you not know? That one, I can't really answer. Looking back, should I have known? Yes, I should have. There were signs: weight loss, unable to save any money, new friends I didn't know, and some legal issues. Also, I had little understanding of opiate drugs and the addiction they will cause. There is one more thing I must add, and I am embarrassed to say it was my own denial. My son was a functioning drug addict. He went to work every day. He had a girlfriend, a social life, and most nights he sat at the dinner table with us. My son, like most addicts, learned to hide his habit very well. He could explain away any concerns I had. I know now there is no better liar than a drug addict. At that point, when Redding's drug problem had grown out of control, I decided to have my son move away for a while. That worked. He was good, then he would come home, the temptation was there, and the habit started again. And again, he would move away. He was able to get clean for months at a time, and then eventually the opiate drug would win the fight again. There was an incident that had happened, and I realized I couldn't help my son anymore. I was told by a professional he had to do it on his own. It was very difficult for me to let him fall, but I knew it was necessary. When he was at a very low point in his life, with the help of his cousin and his own desires, he got the professional help he needed. My son has been clean now for 2.5 years. There are many different treatments for drug addicts. They just have to find the one that works best for them. I have been asked, will your son ever recover? The answer is not that simple. With all addictions, whether it's drugs or alcohol, the addict will always be in recovery. It takes support, courage, strength, and commitment to stay clean. Addiction is a disease, and recovery lasts forever. My son tells me stories of when he was young. I had no idea of what was going on. Sometimes it's hard to hear the stories. Sometimes I don't want to listen, but I always do. I wish I had the answers to stop this drug epidemic. Unfortunately, no one does. I would like to give you some advice. First and foremost, talk and listen to your children. Communicate with the parents of your children's friends. Most importantly, make sure you all have the same thoughts and ideas on rules, expectations, and consequences. Talk to your children's friends. Get to know them. Spend time with them as a group. If you have a bad feeling about something or someone, let it be known. I would also say, educate yourself and your children about all drugs, legal and illegal. Attend any and all programs North Reading is offering, and please bring your children along. Don't be embarrassed or afraid to ask questions to the professionals that are here tonight. This drug epidemic is bigger than any of us. We cannot make it go away. All we can do is educate ourselves and help one another in the hopes of saving another child from the awful disease of addiction. Recently, I heard a story from a parent whose child attended a public charter school until 8th grade where he was not exposed to drugs. He then went on to a prestigious preparatory high school where he was inundated with them. Drugs are everywhere. They do not follow the GPS to the bad neighborhood or the bad town. I know this because I have spent time with my son at doctor's offices, treatment centers, and group settings. I have seen adults, young adults, teenagers, men, women, educated, uneducated, rich and poor, well-dressed men and women, nurses, postal workers, tradesmen, students, people from every walk of life that come from any neighborhood in any town. When I look back on my son's life, it was not easy for him. His dad, my first husband, passed away suddenly of a heart condition. Yes, I know that was traumatic. But my son will tell you he does not blame his dad's death, anything, or anyone else for his drug addiction other than himself and the bad choices he made. Life is not easy for any of us. We have all had our challenges, and I understand that. I also know it could be worse. I can still remember attending North Reading's Drug Awareness Seminar in 2005 and crying as I heard a mother tell the story of her son, a North Reading star athlete that went off to college, a young man that got involved with drugs and died of a drug overdose at 23 years old. My son is now 25 years old. Sometimes he can still break my heart when I look at his face as we visit the college campus of his little brother, and he looks around with sadness in his eyes and says, "I missed all of this." Or when we go for a walk in the park and see a group of teenagers just hanging out, laughing, enjoying the afternoon, again watching with sadness in his eyes, wishing he could do it all over. He makes me smile when he gives me a beautiful Mother's Day card or when he picks me flowers from the garden. He makes me proud when he shows me his bank statement and says, "Wow, look how much money I've saved." But when he comes home from work excited that he got a raise. He gives me hope when he tries to guide his childhood friend to get the help he needs for his own addiction, or when he comes home from a meeting with his counselor with a plan for his continued recovery and his long-term goals. He makes me feel loved when he says, "Mom, thanks for everything you've done," or when he thanks me for not giving up on him. I have been asked, how did you get through all of this? My answer is, I'm not finished. Addiction doesn't end. It is a lifelong battle. My son will always be in recovery. He may get a bump in the road, or the road may get a little rocky, but he knows I'll be there for him. You may be wondering, how many chances can you give, or should you give? You'll know when to believe and trust in your child again, and if you don't, someone else will let you know. I know this because I did give up on my son. He was living in Colorado with his younger brother, and things weren't going well. My oldest son was moving to California, and we were driving cross country. So the plan was we would spend a few days visiting in Colorado. We were in the middle of our road trip when I received a call from my son. He had an opportunity to go to Tennessee to work, and he was leaving the next day. I begged him to please wait. I would be there in a day or two, and he said he couldn't. Once again, my heart was broken, and at that moment, I decided I was done. I looked to the sky, and I said to my late husband, "I'm so sorry. I can't do this anymore. It's killing me, and I have to walk away." Our road trip continued. We stopped overnight in Topeka, Kansas. As we were leaving the hotel, my cell phone rang. It was my son, just checking in, letting me know he was okay. I asked him where he was, and he said, "Kansas." When I asked him what town he was in, he said, "Topeka." I said, "So are we." He told me he was traveling on Highway 70 and just got off exit 356 for gas. With tears in my eyes, I said, "Look up. Do you see that Marriott sign? I am right there." "I'll be there in a minute," he said. What are the chances of that? All I know is I looked to the sky again and I said to his dad, "Okay, I heard you. I won't give up on him." Moments like that is what keeps me going. Tonight, some of my family members are here. They are here because drug addiction affects not only the drug addict, but the entire family. We have all heard stories how addiction can ruin a family, but I'm one of the lucky ones. My family has been by my side from the moment I first realized the extent of my son's drug addiction. My sister can still remember that night. I called her, and all I said was, "Please come over." She was at my doorstep within minutes, and she has been part of my support system every day since. Without the help of my oldest nephew, I'm not sure where my son would be today. Our family has found what works best is to talk about it, no matter how difficult it may be. We must be honest with one another if we want to survive the disease of addiction and how it affects all of our lives. My youngest nephew was 12 years old when my son's drug addiction became apparent. He has received not only an education on drugs and drug addiction, but he has seen